Only an economist involved in politics can announce the coming of a new age, that of a return to the supremacy of politics over economics. This is the paradox at the base of Mario Draghi's story. The ex-president of the European Central Bank is perhaps the public figure that more than any other has faced the future and dealt directly with the idea that there must be a tomorrow, and a different one than this eternal present in which the project of European unification seems to have lost itself. Draghi's talent lies in imagining unexpected outcomes and preparing for hypothetical alternatives, which is why in these last 12 years he's been called upon time and time again to suggest unexpected solutions and sudden changes of pace, to search for a way out in our darkest hour. When all seems lost and turmoil is all around us, that's exactly when Draghi stands to the challenge and leads us with his words away from the inevitable to give us hope once more. Such was the case on July 26, 2012, while a perfect storm was raging over the old continent, putting the peripheral states of Europe at risk of default. Draghi saved the Eurozone by uttering the following historic words: "The ECB is ready to do whatever it takes to preserve the euro. And believe me, it will be enough." He chose those 3 words with care, whatever it takes, with full knowledge that he who controls words controls things. As the years go by, the political landscape changes, but the process of European unity continues to face challenges and obstacles. As the continent finds itself engulfed in war, Mario Draghi stands up again and announces a new age. He doubles down on his words of 12 years ago, which he proclaimed in London during that summer. The only way out of this present crisis is to have more Europe, not less Europe. As always, he reminds us that the future is never set in stone. I am Guido Brera, and you're listening to Black Box, The Hidden Side of Finance, a podcast by Cora Media, sponsored by Docebo. A few days ago, Draghi presented his report on the future of European competitiveness. And once more, he used the occasion to suggest a clear change of course. Globalization is off balance. The growth of world trade has stopped in its tracks. EU companies are facing higher levels of opposition from foreign competitors and have less access to outside markets. The Ukraine war has denied Europe its biggest energy supplier, Russia. Geopolitical structures are collapsing as voters in Europe turn increasingly to the right. Nationalism is on the rise, energy prices are sky high, and European productivity is flailing. Meanwhile, demographic trends are on a downward spiral as well. Forecasts say that Europe will lose 2 million workers by the year 2040 as its productivity continues to stumble. There are clear structural limits, especially on the technological front, where Europe seems to have missed the bus of the digital revolution. When it comes to the top 50 IT companies in the world, only 4 of these are European. The challenge is simply existential. Draghi is a keen chess player, which means that he's apt at looking towards the future and calculating variables in advance. And so, the decisive game that the European Union is playing can be won in 3 moves. First move. Europe needs to cover the gap with the USA and China regarding advanced technologies. The numbers are clear in this regard. None of the European companies with a market capitalization greater than 100 billion euros was founded in the last 50 years. Let's compare that with the United States, where all 6 companies valued at over 1,000 billion started up in the last half century. It's time to change course. Artificial intelligence is making it a requirement. We may well be facing a new era, one of those discoveries that could change life on our very planet, just like electricity or the steam engine. In this phase, Europe cannot afford to be left back in the dust of the 20th century. Instead, the EU absolutely needs to tap its potential for innovation. The second move is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This needs to be a global imperative if we wish to save our very planet from the dangers of human self-destruction. However, this process can't reduce growth either. Quite the opposite. It needs to be an opportunity for the industries of the continent. Despite being well-positioned when it comes to clean energy, Europe is facing pressing competition from China, for example, in the field of electric vehicles. Beijing is racing forwards, boosted by a combination of massive industrial policies and subsidies, control over prime materials, and large-scale production. We're at a crossroads. We can decide to increase our dependency on China to reach our goals regarding decarbonization, with penalties to our own industries, or we can develop a joint plan that brings together both the fields of clean energy and the automotive industry. Third move. The 2020s have brought with them the shadow of war on the international stage. The long apparent season of peace brought about by globalization is at an end. The new world order of the post-Soviet age is no more. And Europe in particular is vulnerable. We depend on a handful of foreign suppliers for our prime materials and digital technologies. Also in this case, according to Draghi, we need even more Europe. We require a foreign economic policy capable of coordinating trade agreements with resource-wealthy countries, of creating reserves in strategic sectors, and of building solid industrial partnerships. The EU is in second place when it comes to military expenditure, but this doesn't reflect on our actual industrial defense capacity, which is still too fragmented. As a result, Europe is at a disadvantage when it comes to producing military equipment unitarily and on a large scale. For example, the USA makes just one type of tank, Europe makes 12. Each of these moves has a cost, however. The investment to GDP ratio will need to go up by 5 percentage points, just like in the 1960s, 70s. Every 12 months, Europe will require 800 billion euros in investments, which is twice the amount of the Marshall Plan. This is why Draghi is once again proposing the same paradigm shift that he's pursued for many years, and which he supported while Prime Minister of Italy, which is to practice the sharing of debt on a continental scale, as well as to issue common debt instruments to finance investment projects. For too long, we've lived in a world outside of time. A global paralysis. The future was no more. Politics was eclipsed by the markets. We were living in the eternal present of catastrophe capitalism, where yesterday would crash into today, while one crisis followed another, one disaster tumbling behind the last one, because each crisis is an opportunity for profit, and each disaster can be stripped for value. Then something happened. The COVID-19 pandemic brought with it a clear cut. The wind was changing. All you had to do was look towards the USA. In December 2020, the former U.S. Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, summarized a new vision in a paper that went unnoticed here in Europe. In it, Summers certified a new approach to public debt management, and he dismantled all parameters which had been the cornerstones of the relationship between growth, inflation, and debt over the past 30 years. It was an attempt to free up debt, provided that it generates public investments with returns on GDP higher than the rates at which it was financed. In a way, these are the same ideas of Mario Draghi. And here we have to look back in time to another summer in the past, specifically to August 18, 2020, when Mario Draghi made a legendary speech at the meeting of Communion and Liberation. Here, he separated the concept of bad debt, or better, that of austerity, from the concept of good debt, as a tool for progress, as a lever to expand worthy investments and support economic growth. On that occasion, Draghi set a course for the European Union, which would include the beginning of the issuance of common debt and the establishment of a community treasury ministry tasked with ensuring stability in the Eurozone. The central banker, who was then on the cusp of entering politics, quoted John Maynard Keynes, the economist who inspired Federico Caffè, who in turn had been mentor to Mario Draghi himself. 2 years later, now as head of the Italian government, Draghi takes part in an informal summit in Versailles. It is March 11, 2022, and the former president of the ECB specifies the need for common bonds in energy and defense. He outlines the economic and political future of the Eurozone. He uses clear and unambiguous terms. We need to find a compromise on where to find the resources. At the national budget level, this space does not exist. A European response is needed. He speaks of energy and defense, which are the two main urgencies following the invasion of Ukraine. It takes courage to imagine the world of tomorrow and to take back the future. And this is precisely the type of courage mentioned in the book, Mario Draghi, the Craftsman. In his words, "My father once told me that there was a monument in a city square in Germany with an inscription that read more or less as follows: If you have lost money, you have lost nothing, for you can get it back with a good business deal. If you have lost your honor, you have lost much, but you can regain it through a heroic deed. If you have lost courage, however, you have lost everything." Black Box is a Cora News podcast, produced by Cora Media and sponsored by Docebo. Written by Guido Brera with I Diavoli. Editorial supervision by Francesca Milano. Intro and sound design by Luca Micheli. Editing and post-production by Luca Micheli and Mattia Liciotti. Production organization by Alex Pederengo.